Not that long ago, the good people down at Vefa Foto in Vejle got 2 new Canon F-1s in, and I got lucky enough to be able to test them out. Not only to see if they had any light leaks, but also to see if the shutter was working, how the light meters were holding up, and in general if they were still up for the fight. And it ended up being a bit of a road trip around in Denmark. When I get a new film camera in hand, I like to always check out the shutter speeds to see if they stick or if they work. And initially with the Canon F1 original, the shutter speeds below 1/8 of a second seemed to stick. So I had to manually wind it to the next frame for the shutter to reset. And that's a bit annoying, but otherwise it seems that all the other shutter speeds worked. Another thing I really love about this model is that it's built like a tank, and it's meant to be used and it's meant to last. So even though the prism has this big bend on top, it still works. You can still see through the prism, you can still change it around, and the light meter still works inside of it. It's no problem whatsoever. This set both came with motor drives and a flash coupler. Testing out the flash coupler, it also worked, which means there was a straight signal going through, which is really nice in case you want to do flash photography with these cameras, because they don't standardly come with the hot shoe. So either you have to wire it with the cable or you have to get the coupler. Putting on the motor drive as well also made it sound like a machine gun. Going at 3.5 frames per second, it just runs through smoothly. And then, after going around in this murky weather, the roll came to an end. I rolled it up, and now it was time to switch camera. Then the time came to the Canon F-1n, and when I initially tested it out, it didn't have any failures whatsoever. The shutter speed seemed to work, and the light meter also worked along. So again, it seemed like a fully functioning camera. Testing both cameras, I really tried to make sure that I went over all the different shutter speeds to make sure that they work correctly. That also meant shooting the same scene a couple of times, moving up and down the shutter speeds and compensating with the aperture to make sure I would get an even exposure through the images. I also wrote most of the settings down in my notebook, which I never do normally, but I just wanted to make sure that I can go back and see which shutter speeds maybe failed on me, so I could let the people at Vefa know.
Tell me, what is this place? Countless people, but not one familiar face.
This chunky piece of glass has the ability to make normal readings from 1 second to 1/60th of a second, but then if you're shooting in dim light, it can make an internal metering from 3 seconds to 60 seconds, which means you just put in the shutter release cable, compose your scene, Make sure to close the eyelid so there's no interfering in the metering, and then you would just leave it. And it would end the exposure once it felt okay, I've had enough light. Making sure to have small lights beeping so you would know, okay, it's still exposing for the image. I had quite a few images that are probably gonna be way underexposed just because I wasn't sure if I used this thing right. I couldn't find that many videos on it online where people actually knew how to use it, so I ended up finding this old manual, which I'll have linked down below, that went over how to use it. And in the end I think I figured it out, because when I would do the exposure, X second later, it would end the exposure, which I could hear, and I could forward it to the next frame. Sometimes I would end the exposure myself, just because I think, okay, maybe I used a bit too high of an aperture, so I would make it too dark and it would exceed the 60-second exposure timings. Hoping these images turned out right, I would finish up the roll down at the local pub for a night of music where I had to test out in dim light, fast motions and a bit with the flash on. Maybe this color film is gonna be one that I'm gonna use a bit more in the future, but I at least wanted to test it out in all different capacities. That was it for me testing these cameras and this film stock. Whichever equipment I don't end up buying myself, you can find back again at Vefa Foto, so go give those people a look. Anyway, I'm gonna go develop the film now and scan it, since I haven't seen it myself, and then I'll see you next time.
I would lay my head down at the evening's end and dream about a love song I'm writing to a friend. I run back to you and you come back to me.